The Ethiopian government has reiterated its commitment to maintaining peace and stability. It is also unreservedly trying to resolve the situations in the northern part of the country. What are some of the things that are standing in the way? Well, my guest today is Jeff Pearce, and he's going to help us find some answers to some of the issues. Ladies and gentlemen, with the program, I'm Shifara Olako. Do stay with us. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me, and it's really good to see you again, brother.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. As I said in my intro, the Ethiopian government is determined, to find peaceful and lasting solutions to the issues in the northern part of the country. However, TPLF seems to be paying no attention. In fact, we're hearing that it is beating the drums of war. So what is going on here?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, from what I've been told, and I've been briefed by a couple of sources, is that they are preparing something again. We're back on familiar ground. A source has told me that basically they have gone into the Humera area and they're trying to demonize Fano and tell people, oh my gosh, Fano's coming, Fano's going to commit another atrocity, you've got to get out of here. And the word is that they are prepping to create another one of their atrocity actions that the Western media can jump on and play up, which will give them another excuse to do something. We've seen this before with the frozen bodies that suddenly go down to rivers and get shot at the same time, which is ridiculous. And apparently they're trying to do the same thing again. I would not be at all surprised if when they try, Lucy Casa is reporting on it because she goes back and forth and plays both sides now. So that's sort of the deal that I'm hearing. They have to do this because unless they have perpetual war, well, they're in deep trouble because otherwise their own people, Tigrayans, are fleeing their area in droves, trying to get away from them. And unless you have another excuse to start up another war, they would actually have to govern, which they can't. They're incompetent. They keep stealing the food from their own people. Even Casa's report, which I think is propagandistic in nature, claimed that Tigrayan women are turning to sex work. Yet at the same time, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. Look carefully at the quotes in her stories. Does anybody talk for translation? The quotes are too perfect. So I have lots of questions, and we're never going to get, the unedited to hear what her so-called sources actually said, if they at all exist. So I would expect that what they plan to do is another propaganda thing of another staged atrocity, and that will be their excuse to start it up again. This could happen any day now. They've probably been waiting for this. They've probably been storing up for this. And they'll probably be unleashing it fairly soon.
You know what? In this connection, the recent remarks by Dr. Tedros Adhanom, the Director General of the World Health Organization, seems to add, fuel to the fire. As you recall, he has said the situation in Tigray is, quote, in quote, the worst disaster on earth. And Ethiopia says his comments are obviously unethical and unbecoming of such a high-profile situation. What have you made out of all these things?
The worst disaster on earth, eh? Well, let's see now. I went through some of the territories that TPL left in Wallo and in the Amhara region, and I saw hospitals decimated. I saw universities ransacked and vandalized. I saw hospitals destroyed. I saw hotels laid waste. And I saw what they did to Afar region, but somehow this is the worst disaster on earth. Okay. First of all, of course, there are unethical remarks. You can go online. People have dug up the so-called manual of conduct that this guy is supposed to abide by as Director General of the WHO, which makes it explicit to say you're not supposed to engage in partisan political remarks. If this guy was Russian or even Ukrainian, they would be telling him to dial it back, knock it off. But they don't. And they don't, and they never will, because he is a TPLFite, and this fits perfectly into the strategy of relying on the ignorance of Westerners about Africa. This is why I'm openly challenging this man's claims and his lies in a public debate with me, or with other Ethiopia advocates. Doesn't have to be me, but I'd gladly take him on. And you know something? He should be doing this. He keeps pushing this siege narrative. Well, you just interviewed recently Francesca Ronkin. I hope I'm pronouncing her name properly. Ronkin. She was right there in your studio. You met her. You posted a photo of her. The drivers of aid trucks who told her how often they deliver aid. And this man keeps doing this and lying. He has the bully pulpit where he is not accountable. Face me, you coward. Face me in Geneva. Face other Ethiopia advocates and defend your claims. Defend it. And to those who say, well, you're looking for attention. Yeah, so is he. Ethiopia deserves some attention for its case. So yeah, by all means, let's bring it on. Let's publicly have it out in terms of who is telling the truth about this. And of course, I don't expect him to agree, but I hope the pressure will mount so at least he is questioned in terms of what he is saying, because the mainstream media is acting like a stenographer in terms of this. And we shouldn't we can't allow him to get away with this. We shouldn't allow any public official to abuse his platform this way.
On the other hand, he also seems to put the blames on some global heads of state being, as he called, racist over not giving to Tigray, and as such, he lacks confidence in that. So do you see some irony here? What's your comment here?
Well, let's get to the confidence issue, but first, let me double check something with you, and this is very important. We've talked together. You are black, right? The last I checked, you are black.
Absolutely.
Okay? And 110 plus million people in your country are black, right? Can we check that? So the thing is, this guy, again, wants to claim it's racism. So I see. So anybody who doesn't agree with his stand or with his position on Tigray, it's racist. Well, let's get to the confidence issue, because that is a long-held tradition in terms of democracies. You can look it up in terms of parliaments or national assemblies in France. You see it in the UK. You see it in Canada. We just saw it recently with Boris Johnson in terms of his own MPs, in terms of what's happening with him, and he was given the boot but is leaving slowly. What confidence means is, I don't believe in you anymore. I don't have confidence in you anymore. Therefore, I don't want to work with you. I don't want to be on your side in the parliament or the office. And this also extends to private sort of companies in terms of things. If you find, or even public administrations, if you find, hey, I don't believe in this guy anymore, I don't want to be affiliated with him, you walk. But here we have a man who is in a very cushy job, in a position of influence, who has openly claimed that the leaders of the Western world are racist, or is implying it. That, to me, sends a signal. We would not put up with this in diplomatic circles if you said this. If you said this, your host government would be calling you in and demanding to see you and say, hey, where do you get off saying this? So this guy has basically given the middle finger, so to speak, to Western leaders and said, well, I think you're racist if you don't agree with me. How can people work with him again? How can you work with him again? Now, the proper honorable thing for him to do would be to leave, to quit, and say, "Well, they're racist. They're not supporting the Tigray cause. Therefore, I'm going to step down." But he won't, and we know he won't because he's very nice and safe there in Geneva. And the second is the fact that this guy claims, what was your quote? The worst disaster in the world.
Yeah.
Well, why isn't he there? Why isn't he stepping down and devoting his energy and his skill and his acumen, what there is of it, to solving that? Why doesn't he have the courage of his convictions to go, well, somebody else can do my job, but not everybody seems to understand the worst disaster in the world. So why isn't he flying off to Mekelle and setting up shop there? But we know he won't, because this man is an intellectual and physical coward. And there's a very interesting additional point, which was made by somebody online, which I'm going to borrow. And that is today, Gadachi Reda publishes, because I really believe this man must be chewing and slobbering his way through 5 trucks of aid a day all by himself. We've seen how large he is. He just had published today an article in the Africa Report, and I will quote you a line from it where he says, like all repressive regimes that prefer to do their dirty work without any scrutiny, the Abiy regime recoils at the possibility of the democratic West taking direct or indirect part in the mediation process. Now, which is it? The Western leaders are too racist not to pay attention to Tigray, and yet desperately you want them in the negotiation process, but you don't want certain Africans, the AU. The appalling hypocrisy in conflict of these two positions, the just is off the charts. They're racist, but we got to get the U.S. in there. We got to get the UN in there for the mediation process. Is it? Pick one. Sorry, no, not buying it. Not buying it at all.
Beautifully put, Jeff. This being as it is also being accused of grave crimes in his native Ethiopia. He's also implicated in serious crimes in other parts of the globe. Some say he is also an immediate danger, even to the public health. So where is he heading now?
Well, it's an interesting question because the man is guilty of sin. I went into this in my Medium article, Wolf in the Fold. And I'll be quite upfront about this. At the beginning of this conflict, I didn't know anything about him. But as I researched him more, and I used to say, people would push me and nudge me, and I'd say, I don't know enough. And eventually I researched him, and it's horrifying. The man's not a medical doctor, but I consider him the Mengele of Ethiopia. He tried to downplay cholera outbreaks. He's directly implicated in millions of Amhara disappearing off the just into thin air, off the rolls of the census, plus scores of women getting forced sterilization and contraceptives without informed consent. From the Washington Post, if you want to play the Western media card, they were reporting on him sucking up to China at the start of the COVID crisis. And the reason why he did this, because he thought that they would be on their side in terms of the TPLF propaganda and the struggle. And they discovered, nope, there's no allegiance there. He put millions of people around the world at risk. How many people possibly died because of this man's incompetence and his corruption? He changed his very quickly as the COVID pandemic situation escalated, save his own skin. But yeah, this guy's a huge danger to public health. So as to where he's heading, he's arrived. This guy won't get the boot into a concentrated push to oust him. In the same way that the Americans realized at the last minute, oh my God, we got to get rid of Donald Trump. because Trump took them to the January 6th insurrection. And then people went, oh my God, he's for real. More people are going to die. But the true disaster of this is, and the true horror of this is that they will die first in Africa. And Westerners will, because their thinking is, well, Africans die there all the time. What's new? They've seen it in how many aid commercials that are broadcast on television. So people in my part of the world will go, yeah, what else? And so he'll skate by for a while on that indifference and that racism. And the only thing that will change is when white people in Europe start inconveniently dying of something. We came close to him being challenged over that by the Washington Post and other operations, but then he changed gears and to save his own ass. Unfortunately, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, as you remember, Jeff, a while back, I asked you if you thought it was a good idea for Ethiopia, if you remember, to have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Isn't the UN so corrupt, so to speak, that you don't see the point or think? What's your comment?
Well, I owe you a debt for asking me that question, because I remember when you asked it, and I thought, yeah, wait a minute, of course Ethiopia should have a seat on the Permanent Security Council, and then other African nations should sit there too. And it's an interesting dilemma, because, and that brings us to an important point. All the energy is focused on Tedros and his corruption, that people forget that this place is corrupt from the top down. I myself, just me, never mind others, but I myself reported on, interviewed 2 whistleblowers. The TPLF stole my digital audio recorder, which, by the way, for idiots who think it doesn't exist, this is the replacement item, by the way, jackasses, that I ordered the very next day after I came home. They stole that, and we know what happened. They tried to embarrass those 2 women, and it blew up in their face. Because, of course, Ethiopians went, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we thought was happening. I reported on how the UN was complicit in helping the TPLF sabotage national exams when the interim government was still operating in Tigray. I have reported on how the UN has tried to cover up kidnappings and assaults, and how their own internal documents prove that they knew about forced recruitments and stealing of aid supplies. So the thing is, why shouldn't we give up on this sort of operation? Well, because countries in the past have left. They have said, no, that's enough, we're leaving. In the same way that countries depart from the League of Nations. And more people are comparing it these days to, my gosh, this is exactly how the League of Nations was going downhill through the corruption. The problem is, you need to use the English expression. There is a need for a body, a world governing body. This is the beginning of its foundation after the Second World War, just as this League, for which Ethiopia was a member too. Everything was slanted towards the Western agenda. You know, you're left out in the cold and they'll still do things. What we need to do is we need to lobby for Ethiopia to have that permanent seat that you're talking about, for other African countries to have that seat. And then you can actually reform from within. Because how many times have we seen where, for better or for worse, in terms of the government that is in Moscow, Russia was the one that stopped the US from getting its way, vote after vote after vote after vote, with the Security Council trying to pound Ethiopia into the ground over its agenda. Well, if you leave, not we, but if you leave, then they go ahead and give themselves the legal fig leaf that they want. Is we need to push for more African representation within the Security Council, which frankly is the only real body that ultimately counts in terms of the big decisions.
Yeah. Before we bring our discussion to a close, do you have any final message that you want to convey?
I do indeed, because I want to make an announcement, and I'm just checking my notes here. Organize my thoughts this way, so forgive me for that. Here's the thing. I want to announce that we need to get young, or at least youngish writers, intellectuals, leaders from other African countries to come together. I hope that this broadcast reaches more than Ethiopians. I am hoping that they will watch this and they'll reach out to me and connect, because if you're out there, I want to hear from you. And let me explain why. People still talk about the No More movement, but let's face it, it's not what it was and is practically on life support. Two of its founders got kicked off Twitter, and you see the slogan, but not much else in terms of initiative, except for a personality cult and demagoguery by one person. And I'm not trying to be cruel, but this is the fact. Social media went out of its way to try to kill the movement. And who runs Twitter? Who runs Facebook? They're run by American corporations, which means that when we are trying to do our own messages, we are fighting on the battlefield owned by the enemy, which works with US security interests. That is a fact. It's been shown by Western reporters as well. So the thing is that the other problem too is that the No More movement was organized along the model of the Black Lives Matter movement, which means that it franchised out so that everybody could do their own thing in separate cities. And that was fine, but it didn't allow for the momentum built, and then it sort of dissipated. We need something new. Now, the thing is, what they've done, and they also attacked the No More movement. People like William Fungus Davison and others attacked it as being some kind of outgrowth of the Ethiopian government. I happen to know that's a damn lie, because I happen to know all three founders, at least two of them I've had multiple conversations with. I happen to know the allies. So they want to try to demonize anything that is a social movement that would just be Ethiopian. How do we fight this? Well, let's see them try to fight an entire continent, because that is what is at stake. The message has to come through that if you attack one, you attack the family of Africa. And we have to organize this now. And I have some thoughts in terms of tactics. I have some thoughts in terms of how we can get around their social media tactics that they're putting on us. My Twitter account is screwed with by Twitter. I'm not allowed to go any higher than a certain part. Other accounts can say the same thing. They take away the followers or scoop up where you're going and minimize your tweets so that you're not reaching as many people. And they have done this right across the board to pro-Ethiopia accounts. Well, I've thought of a few ways around that, and I've thought of a few things that we can do. But first, I'm not an organizer. I'm just a hack writer who writes books, novels and history books. What I want to do is reach out to these other writers, people like Micah Shabala, people who are in the same vein, all kinds of political figures, and let's talk, because we need to build this network now across the continent, and make it a fight. And when I get them, I will explain in a private closed session what we can do and how we can. I hope that you will find me. I'm under Jeff Propulsion on Twitter. I write on Medium. I write on Substack. We need to free Africa from the West's agenda now. And now is the time, because they will do this again. Once they're done with Ethiopia, they will move on and they will play these games, they will play these games again of interfering with social media posts into demonizing whoever speaks against the mainstream media narrative. We have to fight back. Please help. Please help Ethiopia now. Reach out to me and let's talk.
Yeah, indeed. Now is the time. This is the clarion call. Thank you, Jeff, a historian, a novelist, journalist, a prolific writer. Jeff Pearce, thank you so much for your ideas and for staying up so late in the evening.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay. Viewers, with that, we come to the end of today's program. Thank you as well for having been with us. Bye-bye.